Well, good morning, everyone. Thank you for tuning in to today's webinar. Today's a series, the first of a series of Pride-related webinars that we're hosting here in collaboration with two state agencies, the Department of Commerce and Economic Opportunity, as well as the Department of Financial and Professional Regulation. My name is Mario Treto, and I'm proud to serve as the Secretary of the Department of Financial and Professional Regulation, where we oversee licensure of 140 different professions, 1.2 million licensees, and state-chartered banks, credit unions, and financial institutions. But we're here to talk to three incredible individuals that have really paved the way in the state of Illinois for the LGBTQ community. With that, I'll have brief introductions for the three of them, and then we'll get started with the program. We have an exciting panel here before you today. We'll start off with our first panelist, who is someone that I admire and look up to very much, and that's Leader Greg Harris. Leader Harris was elected to the Illinois General Assembly in 2006 and is the Majority Leader of the House of Representatives. Leader Harris serves as state representatives for the 13th District, which includes parts of Uptown, Ravenswood, Lincoln Square, North Center, West Ridge, and Bowmanville. Harris is the first openly gay person in Illinois to become a member and a majority leader. Leader Harris has been on the forefront of state policy around LGBTQ rights, healthcare, and state budgeting. In 2013, Leader Harris sponsored the Religious Freedom and Marriage Fairness Act, which legalized same-sex marriage in Illinois. He was also the chief negotiator on the breakthrough budget that ended Illinois' 793-day budget impasse in 2017. Leader Harris announced in 2021 that he will not be running for re-election and will be retiring from the General Assembly at the end of his term. With that, Leader Harris, thank you for joining us on today's panel. Next up, we also have Senator Mike Simmons. Senator Simmons' roots run deep in the Illinois 7th State Senate District. He was born in Lincoln Square, the son of a single black mother and an Ethiopian refugee father. Senator Simmons' family was one of the first black families to integrate Lincoln Square after the United States Supreme Court mandated that public housing be built in Chicago's North Side. With his lived experiences and equity mindset, Senator Simmons has committed his life to advocacy and public service. He is dedicated to amplifying the voices of seniors, refugees, the transgender community, people experiencing financial instability, single mothers, and other silenced voices in our democracy. He is the first black person to serve the 7th District, the first openly gay member of the Illinois Senate, and the third openly gay black state senator in the nation. So with that, thank you, Senator Simmons, for joining us today. And last but certainly not least, a trailblazer in her own right, we have Representative Cassidy. Representative Cassidy was appointed to represent the 14th District on Chicago's North Side in April 2011. During her tenure in the state legislature, Representative Cassidy has spearheaded a number of major initiatives, ranging from passing the legalization of recreational cannabis in Illinois to the Reproductive Health Act, which repeals a number of restrictions around a woman's right to choose in Illinois. Representative Cassidy's work has focused on mental health, healthcare, criminal justice reform, gun control, and LGBTQ rights, and she serves as the chair of the Restorative Justice Committee. Representative Cassidy is the only open lesbian in the Illinois General Assembly. So with that, thank you, Representative Cassidy, for joining us on today's panel as well. I am completely honored to be moderating this particular panel. I'll start off by saying that, I came out in 2013 as an individual, and from the sidelines, I recently had a conversation with Leader Harris. He was someone that I looked up to and saw how much he was doing, being his open, authentic self in the state legislature, and really has paved the way for many of us to feel secure and comforted and knowing that things were going to be all right. And so with people like him, I was able to come out and feel comfortable and continue the movement in my own right. But I appreciate the three individuals that we have here because they have been paving the way for many of us. I think that a lot of the generation that we see now recognizes that we stand on the shoulders of those that came before us. But I also think that we have a moral obligation to continue to pave the way for the generations to come. And these three individuals have certainly done that and more. So with that, I'll start off with the first question, and it's open to all three individuals. I talked about representation. I talked about the importance in seeing individuals, especially those that identify with the LGBTQ community, in these elected positions. So if you can, I want to know a little bit more about what your thoughts are about having LGBTQ leadership in government and politics, the importance of it, and why it's particularly critical, especially during these times, that we have that representation and that voice for our community.
Any particular order?
Representative Cassidy, you can go first.
Sure. You know, representation matters for a lot of reasons. You know, from the most basic of that, you know, growing up, we didn't see ourselves in these roles. We had to use our imagination. We didn't have uh, role model examples, and you know, the old "if you can see it, you can be it" thing is very, very real. Um, but you know, also just fundamentally, um, being present in these rooms when we're talking about policies, being embodiments of stereotype smashing among our colleagues, being able to have some of those private conversations where you can disabuse someone of notions that they've held for a long time. Those things all make a difference. And I remember when Greg was working on marriage, when Greg was carrying the bill, we were all working on this. There was a stat out there about the likelihood of passage of legislation based on the number of openly gay members of any particular body. You know, and there is a tipping point for that capacity. So it really does make a huge difference. And I hear from people every day who are seeing us do this in our various roles and being inspired by it.
Thank you, Representative.
Yeah, I'd certainly, you know, second everything Kelly said, but just add to it. As important as all this is, it does not happen by accident. Myself, Representative Cassidy, Senator Simmons, other folks you see, Kevin Morrison on the county board, you know, we now have several LGBT aldermen in the city of Chicago and around the state. Yeah, this took years of work. I mean, simply being a member of the LGBT community is not enough to get elected. You've got to do the groundwork. You've got to have name recognition. You've got people want to know you've been involved in issues all along and not just springing up and seeking public office. You know, that's all important stuff. So we also need to help mentor, and this is different community organizations and us as elected officials, you know, other folks who are aspiring to start their politics. And we need to have an infrastructure to back them up and to help them with the things we've all built capacity for over the years, you know, fundraising, volunteers, you know, all those kind of things that are part and parcel of an election.
Great, thank you. Senator Simmons?
Can you hear me? Just double checking.
We can hear you. Yep.
Okay. Well, it's an ironic question around representation when you all can hear me but can't see me. So apologize for the technical issues we're having this morning. But really, honestly, everything that Representative Cassidy and Leader Harris just said, I mean, it's really just about having a record of contributions to the community, you know, that span out over time. Somebody asked me the other day, actually, a family member, about how I winded up in a position where I could be a voice for the community. And I said, well, it was because I was being a voice for the community before being in an elected position. And that, you know, that's just really important that people know that you've been involved. And, you know, in the case of this district, right, there's such a diverse part of the state that there are lots of communities that, you know, we can be making contributions to and advocating for.
Great. Thank you, Senator. I have another question that I had set as my second question, but I'm actually going to go back to something that a few of you have mentioned, and that is for individuals that are interested in getting involved in government and politics. So you mentioned putting the work in and being representative of the community. What are maybe some words of advice that you would give to the youth or to other individuals that are part of our community that are interested in either being a political elected official or to work in government?
Well, you know, I'd say a couple things. There are all different kinds of paths you can go down. I got involved in AIDS activism when HIV first hit the city of Chicago. I was just a guy who went to work, went on vacation, went to the bars. I wasn't involved in community or policy. But when our friends started to die around us, it called us to action, and that was beginning my involvement. Kelly has for years been a leader in women's rights and reproductive rights in the state of Illinois, and that's the path that she took. Senator Simmons has been involved in equity, community planning and development, workforce development for years, and so we're all known quantities, and that's really important nowadays. There used to be some districts in Illinois or some wards in the city of Chicago, for instance, where there were very concentrated numbers of members of the LGBT community. With the broader acceptance of LGBT people in society, you're seeing people moving to every corner of the city and Cook County and the state of Illinois. So there's not as much of a critical mass of LGBT votes in an area as there used to be that you could count on. Well, that might be in your corner. You have to have a broad appeal to every citizen and every community and every group who's looking for representation in their area.
I think Greg makes a great point there, and we have now seen whereas when he and I were coming up, it was Lakeview and it was the 44th Ward, and now we sit in this circumstance where two representatives and our nested senator are all members of the Queer Caucus, and really outside of where back in the day that the first electeds would come from. But now we have a suburban member, we have a member on the county board in the suburbs. We've got members of the city council from far-flung and diverse wards. That really does make a difference, and it is really, as Greg said, you have to make the case for bringing substance to the table and having that substance to offer, because just being gay is not the thing that's going to get you elected.
I would say, and Mario, just can you recap for me the question? I heard youth, but I missed some of the.
Just what words of advice, and I think, Senator, you have an interesting pathway as well. Just words of advice that you would give to youth or those that are interested in getting involved in politics or government in general.
This is easy. I mean, I would just say that, and I've said this to youth consistently over the last several weeks. It's just be authentic, be yourself. For God's sakes, we put so much pressure on young people to be perfect, to comply to some generic standard for excellence. And I just think that is costing some great individuals, right? A lot of people are growing up and being people that they're not. And so I tell youth all the time that ground zero, whether you want to be an elected official or a CEO or an inventor or a poet, is just to be yourself, honor your background, honor your heritage, honor what energizes you, because the world needs more people that are doing what they love and having joy and are, walking in their truth. And I think that if you operate that way and you decide that you want to run for office, I think that's going to be really compelling, because people are literally dying for authentic leadership right now. And so that's what I would say to youth for pretty much anything that they may want to do.
Thank you, Senator. And I think it's completely evident to me when I see all three of you. You bring your full authentic selves to the table, and I love that, and I appreciate that, and it really is inspiring for many of us. I also, earlier we were talking a bit about some of the initiatives, and I think Leader Harris, you brought up some of the accomplishments that each of the different panelists have done throughout their career. And it's, when I think about these individuals, like earlier today, I was thinking about reproductive rights, and Representative Cassidy is a name that comes up right away. There are individuals that have championed so many of these initiatives that have really furthered civil rights here in the state of Illinois and beyond. Can I get a sense maybe from the three of you, And we'll start off with Leader Harris. Some of the initiatives that you are particularly proud of. I know that the legalization of same-sex marriage was particularly important here in Illinois, and Leader Harris, you were a great contributor and leader to that effort. But maybe some of the initiatives or accomplishments that you're proud of that have moved the needle forward for the LGBTQ community.
Well, yeah, certainly gay marriage, I like that one. That was a good one. Expanding rights for trans folks, allowing folks to correct birth certificates, to get health care through Medicaid, and to prevent in private insurance from discriminating against trans health care. I mean, those are all good accomplishments. I think right now is a time where we should stop looking back on all these accomplishments, and patting ourselves on the back, but thinking about how are we going to protect these going forward? Because we all know tomorrow potentially the Supreme Court's going to announce their decision on Roe, and if it's what we had seen before, it's not going to have a catastrophic effect on abortion and reproductive rights, but there's implications for the recriminalization of homosexuality. There are consequences for gay marriage, which we happen to protect it by statute in the state of Illinois, but you may cross Illinois' borders, and at some point, and that will be a problem. We know that the Republicans, and I know this is a state-sponsored webcast. I'm going to try not to get political, but you're seeing the Republican Party now making an organized attempt to demonize trans people, in particularly trans youth. The Republican Party in Texas officially adopted a party plank condemning the entire LGBT community as part of what their policy is going to be. And you can see a trend coming, and this is a political thing. And we saw it in the 1980s when marriage equality and the Defense of Marriage Act and Don't Ask, Don't Tell were all pushed. Whether people believed in those as policies or not, they certainly used them as political weapons to drive people to the polls and cause consequences that held the LGBT community back for decades. And I like to point out that the president at the time was Ronald Reagan, and his election slogan was "Make America Great Again." And here we are, come full circle. And once again, our community's in the crosshairs. So I think organizing to protect what we have and to protect our community, and especially our youth, is going to be critically important. And a lot of these advances, things that Kelly had worked on, I've worked on, that Mike had worked on, in the past couple of years, they passed on a bipartisan basis. We had Republican votes. We had Republican votes on marriage equality. We had Republican votes on a lot of the trans issues. We had Republican votes on LGBT education. I think that day has come and gone. So, we've got to realize as Democrats, how are we going to keep a big enough majority to control the Senate chamber, the House chamber, and the governorship? Because we're going to need all three of those, or at least enough supermajority in one to stop bad things from happening, depending on how things go politically. I think this is really a inflection point for a lot of us we've got to think about.
Yeah, I really agree with Greg. Yes, it is good to reflect and in particular, with gratitude towards some of those wins and the ways that those wins happen, right? As he talked about, so many of these were bipartisan, and that ship seems to have sailed for us at this point. Prior to the RHA, I had never had a partisan roll call. I had never had a bill that I didn't have a Republican vote on. And that was something that's always been a point of pride for me. But we do have to contemplate what moving forward is going to look like, and we have to make sure we have an accurate inventory of the things that we have to watch out for, because they're getting very creative about the ways they attack rights as well. So being sure that we're watching out, for those boring bills that have unexpected consequences, things like that we really need to be on the watch for, and making sure that we are protecting the folks that are most vulnerable and in those crosshairs.
No, I would just add to that how, for me, a wake-up call was when Representative Cassidy, Leader Harris, and myself worked on legislation this session that, basically makes easier access to PrEP and PEP for people who potentially have been exposed to HIV, HB 4430, which the governor signed, which we're excited about. And, when I was carrying the bill in the Senate, I didn't see it coming. I had been in the Senate for about a year, and I'm a pretty friendly guy, right? I've come in with a spirit of collaboration for everybody. And when some of my Republican colleagues started asking really homophobic questions, I mean, and some of this stuff was like not really that veiled, right? Kind of, making a references to trafficking, right? That people are going to dispense PrEP and PEP so that they can traffic young boys and young women, and all of these things that I was like thinking to myself, okay, I've got to push back on this. I mean, it was literally like, this is why we're legislators. All this stuff about representation doesn't mean anything if you don't push back in those moments. And so, I had to push back, and I had to really set the record on that debate and remind people that this was about healthcare, this was about equity, and had to point out how the government completely failed during the AIDS epidemic. And, it was breathtaking to me that was even necessary in 2022 and Senate, where we have super majorities and all these other things, that we still have people serving with us that look like they're carbon copy right out of a generation ago. And as Greg said earlier, I mean, we are seeing a trend coming right now, where there have been 300 pieces of legislation introduced around the country that attempt to put LGBTQ people back in the closet and completely erase us and vitiate our communities. And that, to me, is a source of great anxiety right now, because I know that we have a war ahead of us.
Yeah, that's a great example, Mike. I remember looking at the roll call with you and marveling that, I guess just folks not voting is the good news today. Because after that crazy pants debate, that seemed like it was about a completely different bill, to be honest.
Yeah.
A bunch of the more moderate Republicans, rather than voting with the folks who were, using stereotypes and wild hyperbole to argue against the bill, they just didn't vote instead of voting no. And we kind of had that moment of, well, I guess that's our win for the day, right? Like that's progress of some sort.
Thank you. And I think it is important to, I think we're reflecting on the past, but looking at, being forward thinking and forward looking at some of the things that might be on the horizon. The three of you have already touched a little bit on this, but my follow-up question was going to be, what are some topics that we as Illinoisans need to be aware of or cognizant of with respect to LGBTQ rights, the LGBTQ community moving forward? What do you each see as important issues that are coming up on the horizon? And I think
I guess Greg is taking he's retiring, so we're picking it up. So we're as we're watching, and both Greg and Mike and I we've referenced some of the attacks we've seen around the country. So making sure that we are mindfully addressing protections for the pieces that we have passed, making sure that we are prepared for the influx of families seeking gender affirming care for their kids who are coming from states that have erased their families from existence, essentially. Looking for the ways that we can be supportive of providers who perhaps treat patients who live in other states, and make sure that we're protecting their licenses. Those are all pieces that are currently very pressing. And then there's the unfinished business that we have here. We've got a couple of bills pending in the Senate that made it out of the House, that are around creating more protections for our trans siblings. Both the removal of the barrier to name change, and then there's a marriage license bill that cleans up challenges. So just constantly being vigilant, I think, is critical for those of us who are trying to hold the line.
I would agree with that. I think for me, the big issue I'm really concerned about is when we see, this train coming and we see all of these bills, literally over 300 bills that have been introduced, just in the last several months, targeting LGBTQ people, particularly youth, LGBTQ youth, transgender folks. This is having a pronounced effect on mental health for LGBTQ young people. And so honestly, I would say right now that that's probably the top issue that I'm concerned about is what is this doing to the sense of wellness for 14, 15, 16-year olds, LGBTQ youth all across the country right now that they're seeing all of this hateful legislation that targets them and it doesn't make sense. It doesn't make sense to me as an adult. Imagine how hard it is for them to process. Why is this happening? Why is there so much animus about me? And it just to me, if there's anything in my role as senator that makes me literally want to flip a table and like fight, it's this issue when children are attacked, when young people are attacked. It's so unnecessary and it's so hateful and it's so stupid. And I just sometimes can't believe that, even at the beginning of my time in public service, that this is a fight that I'm going to have to spend years fighting when I thought that honestly we had already put all of this to rest. 20 years ago when I was struggling to come out as a Catholic school, high school student, where people still regularly use words like fag and troll and all these other things that affected my coming out process and affected my sense of self and how I saw my community. And it's taken years for me to to recover my sense of identity and being a healthy adult. I don't want the next generation to have to experience that. And I feel like the weight is on my shoulders and Kelly's shoulders and other of us as queer electeds to fight this war. And it's just, I mean, I'm up to the battle, but it's just so discouraging that we even have to fight this battle again. It's the same thing with Roe v. Wade. It's 50 years, a generational right being snuffed away from us. And it can just be very, the type of thing that actually keeps me tossing and turning at night, to be honest with you.
And I did wait till last because, they'll have a longer shelf life than me. But, as we go through, the next, 6 months where I'm still around, here's what I think, we really also need to focus on is while we look at LGBT rights, I know that's the topic of discussion today. We're not in a silo and we're not in a vacuum. There are a lot of other communities where, we have membership or intersectionality, who are equally under threat right now. And I think we've all got to lock arms and work together, whether it's the immigrant and refugee community, whether it's reducing healthcare disparities, whether it's making sure returning citizens are treated fairly and welcomed back into society. And you can go just down this whole list of things, reproductive rights, the whole list. We've got to all work together, because if we don't, and one group says, well, your rights are sort of important, but ours are at this threshold here, and we got to prioritize those. You see some of the infighting you see in Washington now, just among groups, and I think that's a bad mistake. We've got to really work together to be sure that we lift up everyone as we go along and don't leave anyone behind.
Thank you, Representative. And that's actually a great follow-up to my next question. So I think for some individuals, intersectionality might be a new word, a new topic that we discuss. And I talk about the vibrancy of the LGBTQ community. For me personally, we wear many hats. I'm a member of the Latinx community, the Mexican American community, LGBTQ. And when you kind of bring these experiences together, it creates an entirely new experience that maybe others that identify within one community or that wear one hat might not relate to. But I think it certainly shapes who we are. Senator Simmons, I'm always impressed when I hear about your background and you have talk about the ultimate melting pot of experiences in terms of, having a refugee parent that is that is not from the United States, having having the lived Black experience, being LGBTQ, all of this together has created such a champion for so many communities, together and also separately. So I want to get a sense, and I'll start off with you, Senator Simmons. Just can you give me a little bit of background with how that experience, how your identities have shaped you into who you are, and how that has presented its own unique lens with how you look at legislation moving forward, and how you interact with your constituents as well. I'd love to hear from you, and then we'll hear from the other two representatives.
Thanks, Mario. I mean, it's a great question. I think the number one thing for me is I think I've developed an ability to listen and have empathy, because as a as you say, intersectional person, I come from a family where literally my grandparents would not be able to communicate with each other because they didn't speak the same language, and so that family gatherings where there are people that can't communicate, you sort of learn how to navigate different communities. You learn how to, communicate with people in ways that are not always sort of just what they're saying, but what they're doing, body language, all these other things. And when you're talking about a diverse community, I think that's positioned me to be able to work really effectively with so many different constituencies, both those that I represent and those that maybe, I don't come from those backgrounds, but I've just, developed an ability to listen, to work with people, collaborate, have empathy, appreciate diversity. My mom is the biggest inspiration for that. I mean, my mom, ran a salon in Rogers Park that had a clientele of people, everybody from, somebody that had recovered from a drug addiction, white person from Appalachia, to a South Asian doctor, to, an Irish immigrant, transgender person. I mean, she had the entire world coming and going all the time when I was a kid. And so that has really shaped my sense of community. It's really, she really instilled me with the ability to appreciate diversity. And so that's probably the biggest way that my kind of intersectional background shows up as senator. And I would even say also just the ability to be able to give people the benefit of the doubt, right, is something that when you come from an intersectional background, I mean, part of the reason all these communities are reflected in who I am is because people came together, right? And I saw that growing up. And so that's really how I show up and my role as a state senator. That's how I lead.
Thank you so much, Senator. Always inspiring to hear you and your background and all that you've championed for. As I was reviewing your bio and all the communities that you've worked hard for, it's evident the passion that you hold and you have, and these experiences that you've had, especially with your mother, have really shaped you into the successful senator that you are. I'll turn it over to the representatives if they have any other insights or things to add. I know that it's being a woman in the LGBTQ community is a very different lived experience than being a cisgender male, in the LGBTQ community. So I'll turn it over to Representative Cassidy.
Sure. I mean, the reality of our work is that we all bring a whole lot of identities to the table. As a first generation kid, as a recovering Catholic, as a convert to Judaism, as a queer woman, as a transplant from Florida. Like, all of these things inform the way we move through the world. And that's true of our colleagues as well. And it gives us that opportunity to try to find some common ground. One of my best friends in the General Assembly is one of the most conservative members of the House Republican caucus. But we have a lot of shared experience in our upbringing as the youngest of 7 kids. Those are opportunities to make connections and find opportunities to work together. Greg earlier talked about my history working for reproductive rights, for women's rights, for equality. There was certainly a time in the feminist movement where lesbians were the lavender menace. Finding ways to navigate and undo those divisions, I think, is a big part of our work, and a big priority of our work.
And I guess I just add that, a lot of times, when you think about intersectionality, sometimes not really obvious where people, what different groups of people belong to. And one of the things that I talk about is the struggles I've had with substance abuse and mental health issues. And to me, it doesn't seem like a big deal to say those things out loud. But then, I'm always surprised and really sort of feel good when people say, "Oh my God, thank you for talking about that." It's something I can't bring myself to talk about in my life, and they, this always strikes me as a little odd. They say it's so amazing that somebody can rise to your level and talk about those things and be open. And I guess I always think the world has moved along and we're a little bit better than we are, but apparently that's not the case. So just those things. Also, just saying out loud and giving names to the different things that we are and we've done, has the effect of helping others along too.
Thank you, Leader Harris. And that brings us to a great follow-up. I think that something that I've appreciated as well from each of you is the vulnerability that you have in elected office. I think sometimes people see just that, the success stories, but they don't see some of the challenges that you face professionally, personally. I know that we all have our experiences where you might have been bullied as a child, or you might have had people opposing some of the initiatives that you've had. I think Senator Simmons, you referenced that earlier, and how there's an education component that we also have, and that's a lot on people's shoulders. But I essentially want to just ask, if you feel comfortable, what are some of the challenges, so that viewers can essentially hear that we as much as a vibrant and great community that we are, there are challenges that we face on a day-to-day basis. So maybe some of the challenges that you faced, some of the difficulties that you faced personally or maybe professionally as an elected LGBTQ official.
Okay. I mean, I think that, at some level, it's adulting is hard. So we all face struggles, right? But, being the only lesbian, being the first queer parent in the General Assembly, having people question your validity as a queer person when you had a kid, that was bizarre. Those pieces of, constantly having to sort of provide that education is a thing. Being a single parent for most of my career was certainly one of the challenges, but it was one of the things that I hear the most from people, that it gave them the capacity to know that they could handle it too. So there's, it really changes with the times too. When I first came out, and started working in politics in Chicago, it was unusual for there to be openly gay staff. Greg and I were among some of the first folks that were employed by politicians, and that was a thing. And so it's just the challenges change as the climate changes. I think right now the ugliness in our public discourse is a huge piece. The quantity and vociferousness of the hate mail has reached a level that I've not seen in my career. That's become very real. People are very comfortable making pretty explicit threats now.
I would say that for me, the most challenging part is, it's like you feel sometimes like, when I talked about this war that we're about to fight, and how, we got Greg for another 6 months, and those are going to be, I'm going to ensure that those are 6 long months, and we get everything we can out of Greg. But really, this is going to be a war that in terms of being legislators, Kelly and I and our colleagues are going to have to fight. And the amount of pressure that, like, I literally feel on my shoulders, the responsibility to wage that war is probably the most difficult part of being an LGBTQ legislator right now, because you kind of know in your gut, like, it's us, right? I mean, it's just literally a few of us individuals that when State Farm decides to parade around as an ally, a corporate ally, but then cancels a partnership that puts LGBTQ affirming books in community centers and school libraries, we're the ones that have to call it out. When Darren Bailey on the floor of the Illinois Senate refers to queer parents as purveyors of perversion, I'm the one that has 3 months into the Senate. I'm the one that has to stand up and call them out in the chamber that is very conservative and does not oftentimes smile upon junior members doing such a thing. When I have constituents come to the Senate who are transgender and I decide to have them recognized, it's a big project, and I have to talk to 7 to 8 different people to make it happen. That's a lot. And I think that probably is the hardest part of showing up, is you just know that there is so much work that we have to do to make up for lost time. And there's a lot of work because of the 2022, the political climate we're living through, where we're seeing this sort of backlash or this pendulum swinging, where there's just a few of us in this boxing ring where there's just like a ton of people coming at us all the time. And so, but I'll tell you one thing. I know I speak for all of us when I say we're up for the challenge.
Yeah, I'd say, Mike and Kelly both said a lot, but yeah, when you're one of just a couple of anything and you're an elected official, the feeling of the weight of, oh my God, I've got to do this, I've got to do it right, and should I, screw up, then a whole bunch of people will be disappointed, or a whole bunch of people will be judged by what goes on. That's a burden. But what Kelly said, she and I, having done this for a number of years, I mean, we've certainly been familiar with, the bomb threats and the death threats and, hazmat teams at our offices and stuff like that. That in and of itself is not new. But now that there are groups of politicians out there, encouraging people to make death threats, and it's really sport for people, and they get on social media for doing it, and they don't get condemned. It's like, attaboy, be more horrible. And how you stop that from being the circling drain where one side just keeps seeing if they can outdo the other in their hatefulness. I think that's something that all of us have, in all walks of political life are going to have to confront sooner rather than later. Or I guess it could just continue to spiral down. That's a bad outcome.
Thank you, Leader Harris. Pride Month means so many different things to so many different people, whether it be recognizing the past, recognizing Stonewall, recognizing the continued efforts that we need to do moving forward. I guess my question to each and every one of you is what does Pride Month mean to you, and what brings significance to Pride Month in your life, and what are things that you would recommend or initiatives that you would ask individuals to consider or do during this particular Pride Month and beyond? Because I think one thing that I also challenge is, Pride Month can be very corporate, and it could be 1 month out of the whole year. I want to have Pride all 365 days, each and every year. So I'll turn it over to you, but just the general question: what does Pride Month mean to you, and what are the things that you hope people consider, either LGBTQ community members or allies, during this particular season? So with that, I'll turn it over to Representative Cassidy.
Sure thing. It's like you. I've never been a huge fan of Pride as a party. I came up as an activist. I came up as an organizer. I at the same time, I remember, my first Pride, just being exhilarated by being around that many gay people as a kid from a small town. So I get that need for that connection and that celebration. But I think that this year, more than any in recent memory, it's so important to remember that Pride is a protest. Pride is a defiant act of existing, and we need to return to those roots, because there are very powerful forces conspiring to erase us. And so, realizing that, we do need to come together and we do need to celebrate. But we also have to be prepared to fight back every single day for the foreseeable future.
I would say that for me, Pride Month is very much a hopeful time of the year. And I say hopeful because I think that defiant showing up as who we are is a hopeful thing, right? That we exist in a society that attempts to erase us, attempts to co-opt and appropriate who we are as collective queer people all the time. And so that we show up and we experience, you'll show up in joy and authenticity and take to the streets and march and celebrate and do so in a robust way is like one of the most beautiful parts of the LGBTQ experience in my view. That said, right, I really think that we have to remind the community, as Kelly just said, that Pride is a outgrowth of the gay rights movement. I mean, this really is about the Stonewall Rebellion, where a Black woman, was being dragged by a police officer and chose to resist, right, and exhorted everybody else in the gay bar to resist the police officers that were trying to crack down on them just for experiencing joy and having a space for themselves. And so that leads to the gay rights movement, that leads to the birth of pride parades. And so we must, particularly as leaders in the queer community, we have to remind the masses that this is something that comes out of protest. And so what are we all doing to carry on that tradition of protest, right? Whether it's, making sure that we vote or calling out bigoted politicians or organizing around issues that are important to queer people, such as, housing for homeless youth or HIV funding or the other panoply of issues that we fight for. I think it's really important that if we're going to celebrate and we're going to march, that we remember the political undercurrent of what we're doing, because our community is politicized, right? We're not choosing these battles. These battles have kind of fallen upon us. And so, we have to make sure that we remember that if we want to continue to be, where we are, right, in terms of our rights and our community and everything else, we have to kind of fight to retain that and grow that over the years to come.
I just follow along with what the last two said, but also point out, I can't be lost on us that when Pride Parade started, I don't know if you saw pictures of some of the first ones, which were downtown around Daly Plaza. I mean, you were lucky if you had 50, 60 people actually, walking in the parade. And certainly there were some audience members, but if you go back and look, it was a pretty sparsely attended thing. I mean, I think it's indicative of a lot of progress that now, 1.5 million people come to cheer the Pride Parade on. And at the beginning, there were no businesses who would want to put their name associated with anything lesbian or gay, bi, or trans. Now, a lot of businesses do want to be seen as supporting us, and they actually do support us. Some, it's more problematic. Now the complaint is, oh, so there's too many politicians in the parade. I mean, it's within the living memory of everyone on this call where you'd be amazed if a politician would show up. Now they understand the power of our community and the power of our vote. But as Mike and Kelly said, that 1.5 million people that come down to cheer for us and go to clubs to celebrate us afterward, the challenge for us now is how do we get them to do stuff the other 364 days a year to help protect our rights, at every level of government. And it can be protest. It can be joining a community organization. If they have the capacity, it can be fundraising. I think we really just got to think about as a community how we have a call to arms to get these folks involved on a daily basis to face what, clearly you see the three of us are sitting here really concerned that's coming along.
Well, thank you three for an incredible conversation. I know that we reached the end of the hour, but I have to say, I take a moment to take this experience and this moment in. It's an honor to even have this conversation with three people that I really do look up to a lot. It just is powerful to hear words, to hear your passion with all the initiatives that you've done, to hear your lived experiences and how they've shaped you. It's just been quite an honor to hear from you, and I'm sure that constituents and licensees at IDFPR and residents of the state of Illinois all are eager to hear more. So I'm sure that they can contact your respective offices if they have more follow-up questions or want to hear more from you. I just want to personally thank you as an individual for giving us this hour. I think that this was very powerful and very impactful on my end, and I'm sure for many of those that are tuning in as well. Leader Harris, I know that we talk about these 6 months that we have. It's the magic number that we're throwing around, but thank you for your tenure and for everything that you've done for all of us. I think that it goes without saying that many of us wouldn't be in our seats. Myself in this position as an appointed official and as elected officials, you've paved the way for so many of us. So thank you personally. I appreciate everything that you've done. And Representative Cassidy and Senator Simmons, you've already done a lot of work during your tenure, and I'm looking forward to seeing the continued success stories that you both. I know, Senator Simmons, you've been a little bit over a year now, and you've certainly made your mark, and I'm looking forward to seeing that as well. And Representative Cassidy, it's always great to hear your name and seeing everything that you've been accomplishing. I know that there are certain topics where you are the headliner, the person that really has moved those initiatives forward. So thank you for everything that you've done. With that, thank you all for taking the time. Thank you all for tuning in. Again, this is the first webinar of a number of the ones that we're doing as in collaboration with the Department of Commerce and Economic Opportunity. This is the Department of Financial and Professional Regulation. The next one will be the Equitable Small Business and Workforce Resources with Pride. And that'll be next Tuesday on June 28th from 10 a.m. to 11 a.m. Thank you all for tuning in, and happy Pride. Thank you.